To that point, let's bring in George Washington law professor and Fox News contributor Jonathan Turley. And Professor, I want to get your thoughts on this because, you know, this is going to be an incident that will be thoroughly investigated. The videos that we have seen so far, and I'm sure that there's many more of them, because there were a lot of people who were taking videos at the time as these ICE officers were being confronted or blocked from their duties. They're going to be analyzed frame by frame, but already you've got the mayor of the city out there saying, I've seen the video. What the DHS is saying is BS. You've got the governor of the state saying, this is all propaganda. Don't believe what they're telling you. I mean, is this the way to approach something like this?
I watched that press conference with the mayor, and I found it breathtaking how reckless his rhetoric became. He was clearly playing to the moment without knowing all of the facts. There hasn't even been a completed investigation, and yet he was declaring this officer as guilty of murder. He was doing that with a huge mob forming around this site. So I can't imagine anything more irresponsible than what we watched from the mayor. I'm not surprised given the history of that city, but I don't understand how any elected official could fuel the rage as he did. And then to say that we're doing this out of love and then follow that with a line of profanity and demanding that all ICE leave the state seems rather in conflict. Now, if responsible people in Minnesota want to look at this, then there's a few guidelines that they should consider. One is we need to see all of the videotape. These officers generally have body cam cameras on. We very likely can get the image from the officer who was the shooter if he did have that type of camera on his uniform. But the standard here really was created in Tennessee versus Garner by the Supreme Court. And the use of excessive force under the Fourth Amendment is based on a determination of what's called the totality of the circumstances. Now, that term is important because as recently as 2025 in the Barnes case, the Supreme Court reaffirmed, we look at all of the circumstances surrounding the use of lethal force. Now, the circumstances here, we already know to some degree. There was an increasingly violent situation occurring at that scene. Someone blocked the officers as they tried to work down the road or to move down the road. We have videos that do not seem to reflect what the mayor said. He said that the car was just moving away from the officers. We have to look at all the videos. One of the videos I saw had an officer in front. Certainly there's a bullet hole in the front of the window of the car. If there was an officer in front of the vehicle, that is a basis for the use of lethal force if that officer's life was in imminent danger or the lives of others. Now, that is very contextual. That's why the Supreme Court's emphasized we look at the totality of the circumstances. But as early as last year in the Barnes case, many of the justices went out of their way to say, look, these are very dangerous situations for officers. And they really made it clear. The point here is not to second guess officers who have to make a split second decision, because that's what we train them for. The question here is, did the officer legitimately feel that his life was in imminent danger or the lives of third parties?
I'm just imagining, based on your description of all the cell phone video that's going to be available here. I mean, we've all seen a handful of them already circulating, but you look at the massive amount of people that are there now, probably a little bit less in that moment, but people who are watching this confrontation from their windows, from their front yards, neighbors, people that had gathered on the street there. You'd imagine there's a lot of video. And to your point also about the cameras that the officers themselves would be wearing, you have to think, Jonathan, they'll be able to put together a lot of the pieces of what exactly led to this shooting that resulted in this woman dying.
I think that's clearly true. We also have to keep in mind, it was not that long ago that ICE had a sniper attack on an ICE facility. They've had other vehicles try to run them over. The number of attacks on ICE officers has skyrocketed due precisely to the type of reckless rhetoric that we heard from the mayor. These officers are trying to deal with that situation, and they have not received particularly strong support in some of these cities in terms of these scenes as they become more and more violent. So we've got to look at the evidence here, and hopefully there will be some politician in Minnesota that exercises a modicum of restraint and responsibility and says that for everyone involved, we need to look at these videos. We need to allow the investigation to go forward. But what people need to understand is a vehicle is viewed as a weapon. There are plenty of cases where the police have been justified in using potentially lethal force against someone in a vehicle. So this is going to come down to what was the speed, the distance, the direction of the vehicle, whether she was told to stop, whether it was an officer who was hanging on the car or in the path of the car. All of those issues are now being worked on.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.